I've given you sunshine, I've given you rain. Looks like you're not happy unless I open a vein. Hello, Huge Movie Fanatic Nate, stopping on by. This time I'm coming at you to review the remake, or the remake, reboot, whatever the hell you want to call it, the musical version from 1987 of Little Shop of Horrors. Basically, I actually saw this in the theater in its initial run back in, I think, 1987 when it came out, and at the time, I really dug it as a kid. I thought it was absolutely fantastic, and actually just recently got the Blu-ray. Not having this on, I don't think, well, we probably had this on VHS. I don't think we ever got the DVD, or I ever got the DVD of this. And then having revisited the original, I was like, well, I want to see the musical one, and in particular there was a director's cut, because there's also a director's cut of it out as well. And I don't know when the director's cut came out for the first time. I don't know if that came out on DVD or if the first time the director's cut was ever released was the Blu-ray, but regardless, having seen, I'll pretty much be reviewing, I'll talk about both of them, but I think ultimately I'm probably going to be reviewing more or less the director's cut version more ultimately. But yeah, I mean, having revisited this movie, and I haven't seen this one in quite a long time, and I was just really blown away. Before I start the review, I just want to say that holy crap, the special effects, the mechanical effects of the plant, which is named Ottery 2 in this movie, was absolutely, watching this now in 2018, where everything is just computer generated. I know that computer-generated effects aren't as good as practical effects. I mean, everyone who's got a brain pretty much knows that. But watching this movie again after not having seen it for so long, I mean, the effects of the practical mechanical effects of the plant is just absolutely stupendous. And not that I give a shit one way or another about Oscars or Academy Awards. I really hope, that even not caring or hating Oscars and Academy Awards myself, I kind of hope that this won something, not that it really matters, for the mechanical effects of the plant, because I mean they're absolutely stellar and just top notch, probably a really pinnacle of mechanical and effects in a movie. This is really amazing. So it should be said that I'm not a big fan of musicals. I probably give this one a pass, probably just because I saw it, I grew up with it and saw it when I was a kid. But I think even if hadn't seen it when I was a kid and saw it for the first time just now, I'd probably think the same thing, which is this is a really, as much as I hate to even say it, this is a really, really great musical, and the musical numbers are absolutely fantastic. And I think for me, one of the things that really that adds to the charm of the movie is basically taking place in the early 60s or whatever, I think around the same time as the original movie was made. That factor really, really makes, adds charm to it. And one of the things that I, didn't forget about, but I didn't realize how much of an impact it had on me, or I forgot how much impact this particular detail had on me, is the three girls who appear in all these kind of different 60s dresses and stuff, who introduce the movie and show up throughout the movie. They really add such an amazing part of this movie, and it's kind of a bummer because their presence, like for the last half of the movie, isn't as strong, isn't as strong as it was in the beginning of the movie. That's kind of a bummer, because it's so great seeing them pop up in some of the first, the musical numbers at the beginning of the movie. Toward the beginning, the first half of the movie, they're featured so prominently in the different outfits every time, and it made me remember how much that I kind of really thought, even back as a kid seeing it for the very first time, the lighter skinned girl, I kind of had a little bit of a thing for her. She's really cute, and when watching the beginning of this movie and the opening, the first song, like the Little Shop of Horror, like the opening credits song, with them and stuff, and it's raining and all this stuff. It's just like the lyrics are so great, the set is so great, the coverage and the way it's edited, and the things they have them do, or with what's that called, the choreography of what they do physically and stuff. I mean, everything is so freaking perfect, and I was just like, I had goosebumps watching the beginning of this movie and I just completely remembered how, even from the first time ever seeing it, how taken I was with that opening seeing them three girls just was just like, oh my gosh. So yeah, even back as a kid, I remember, definitely, and still now, I have the exact same feelings watching that scene. It's just like the lighter girl, the lighter skinned girl really still does. I mean, she's older than me, so I can say this. I mean, really does something for me. But Rick Moranis, of course, at his kind of prime, having just come from his goofball, it's basically the same character that he just, they did in Ghostbusters, of course, I think is perfectly cast as Seymour. Basically, I don't think I'm really going to talk about the plot of this movie because I just reviewed the original movie. And everyone who pretty much knows, if you want to know what the plot of this movie is, watch my review of the original Little Shop of Horrors, because I'm not going to go, I don't think, too much into the plot. It's the same basic thing. Now, from what I understand, of course, what happened is sometime, I don't know if it was in the 80s or probably sometime in the 80s or something like that, the premise from the original movie Little Shop of Horrors was made into an off-Broadway musical, if I'm understanding correctly. So from what I can only assume that the musical numbers in this movie were just taken from the musical, so they didn't have to be written for this movie. Of course, that's just an assumption, but I do want to say that the musical numbers, not being a big fan of musicals, the musical numbers in this movie are absolutely just amazing. Pretty much just across the board, just freaking amazing. And as I said, they're made even more amazing by the appearance of them three girls in their little 60s dresses. It just adds so much more class to the scenes and makes the scenes so much more, it's just kind of like surrealistic and just magical. If them three girls weren't a part of this movie, I mean, it wouldn't be nearly as great as or the musical numbers wouldn't be nearly as great as they are. And from what I understand, obviously Rick Moranis was, cast as Seymour, but from what I understand, the woman who played Audrey in the musical was just ported over from the musical into the movie, which kind of makes sense if you think about it. And as I said in my review of the original Little Shop of Horrors, because I'm more partial to brunettes, and just in general, I think that Jackie Joseph she just does more for me, having revisited both of these movies recently. Jackie Joseph as Audrey just does more for me than this woman who plays Audrey in this movie. Not to say that she's bad or anything, I just prefer the Jackie Joseph version of Audrey. Of course, Mushnick, I think, is, it's really hard to replace. I really like the Mushnick of the first movie. The Mushnick in this is fine. Some of the biggest differences about this movie is that Seymour is an orphan in this movie, and they don't have any shtick because of that fact. They don't have any shtick, obviously, with Seymour's mom in this movie. The premise in this movie is Seymour's an orphan, and Mushnick lets him basically live in the basement of the flower shop in this movie, which is fine. It doesn't really matter. And another difference in this movie is the dentist in this movie. Audrey's actually dating the dentist, which kind of makes sense, because we know that the dentist from the original movie is this, sadistic sadist guy who likes to, make people be in pain or whatever. So it kind of makes sense in this movie because he's the same character, of course, but now that Audrey's dating this abusive guy, he's abusive, of course, not only to his patients but to her as well, which kind of plays into more of reasoning why Seymour decides to actually in this movie, unlike the original, Seymour actually goes to the dentist's office with a little gun looking to kill him later on when he wants to feed the plant or whatever. It should be said that, at the time I was a huge fan as a kid, being 10 or 11, huge fan at the time of Steve Martin. And to me, the scene, and watching it again, not having seen it for such a long time, the scene where it introduces Steve Martin on the motorcycle and his little song, you'll be a dentist, that song is just such a fantastic musical number, and Steve Martin is just absolutely hilarious in that bit. And I just thought that scene was just the coolest frickin' scene in the world when I was a kid, and saw it at the theater and had it on home video after it came out and stuff. Oh my gosh, and it was just crazy revisiting this movie. I don't know the last time I saw this. I might have not seen this since the 90s. It's been quite a long time, because like so many things, when you watch them a lot when you're a kid and stuff, you kind of get sick of them or whatever, or you leave some things behind, and then you go revisit it, and it's just like, this doesn't happen with everything, but this movie is just like, having rewatched it recently is just a freaking powerhouse. And all the, as I said, not being a freaking fan of musicals necessarily, this one gets a pass because this is such a, powerful and just strong, just such a competent musical. And to be honest, you're almost, when those brief moments in between, musical numbers happen, you're almost kind of like missing the musical numbers, where it's like normally I kind of like, roll my eyes in a musical when the music bit starts. And this one, it's like, come on with the next musical number, because they're so freaking fun. So, having just recently got the Blu-ray, and I just for the very first time saw the original intended director's cut, which it makes the movie so much even better than it was initially. Of course, that never seemed right, with the last scene of the and I've kind of already gushed and mentioned about how amazing the animatronic different stages, but in particular the grown version of Audrey 2 is in this movie. It's absolutely freaking amazing. And when I was watching this, I was like, how do they get those lips to move so fast? And I looked a little bit at the behind the scenes footage, and I saw that they had the music slow down a little bit. So what they must have done is undercranked the camera at the exact same speed, or matched, undercranked the camera and the music at the same speed. So on set they played the music a little slower so the mechanical could do, probably its maximum of what it could do. And then when you undercrank the camera and have the music play slower, and then when you play the the film back at the speed the music should be at, this then the lips are moving faster. And that was just, I never knew that until I just watched the making of. That was a genius way to speed up the already amazing animatronic Audrey 2 plant. I mean, holy cow, if you're like a freaking teenager or 20-something or 30-something or any age, and just, in particular a younger person who has never seen this movie, and you grew up with, basically effects being nothing but computer-generated effects, this movie will blow your ass off. It's some of the most unbelievable practical mechanical effects that I can ever remember seeing in a movie. And as I said, these days, being so just desensitized by computer-generated effects and stuff, you forgot. I forgot all about the effects in this movie and how freaking amazing they are. And just the very end scene, or the last scene with the the freaking Audrey 2, and when all the pods are other little other little voices, and extra singing voices and stuff, and just all the stuff they do with the extra little mouths that are singing along with the plant. And oh my gosh, the scene where basically he destroys, he's got Seymour and he destroys the flower shop, and oh my gosh, it's so freaking amazing. And it's really, really one hell of a freaking movie and accomplishment. And in closing, if I can briefly talk about the original intended ending, where I was really surprised to see, but I think this ending is so much, and I can only assume it's the ending of the musical. I think the ending is so much better than the original theatrical ending, where actually Audrey dies. Not only does Audrey die, but she, in her last breaths, tells Seymour to feed her to the plant. That way, she'll always be, him and Audrey, she'll always be together with Seymour, and not knowing, of course, that he would end up later on in the plant as well. So he feeds, in a very ceremonial kind of a whatever scene, feeds Audrey to the plant. And then later on, of course, when he confronts the plant or whatever, he ends up getting, gobbled up, actually grabbed by the vines, and very slowly, placed into the plant's mouth by the plant's vines, and in another kind of ceremonial almost kind of scene. And then the plant in the original theatrical version, in the director's cut on the Blu-ray, there was also another thing that was a little bit of information that was shown before Seymour dies. He goes up, after feeding Audrey to the plant, Seymour goes up onto the building to basically jump off and kill himself, and this guy shows up, this salesman guy. Hey, we got a proposition for you. We took this, this cutting or whatever from the plant and grew a bunch of little Audrey 2s, and I've got this thing right here, and I've got this proposition for you to pay you a nice sum of money to continue to take pieces off your plant to continue to grow these. Of course, you don't really need to keep taking them off Audrey 2, because if you're growing other ones, you can take them off that. But so basically, there's a little plot point before he dies, before Seymour dies, that shows that this has already happened, and there's already other Audrey 2s all around the country and stuff. So basically, after Seymour dies, there's this really cool kind of just, B movie, 50s B movie montage and a musical number of basically all these Audrey 2s just being a huge kind of gargantuan, Godzilla sizes and going, trudging through miniatures of cities and throwing taxi cabs all over the place and just wrecking havoc all over the country. And I gotta tell you, not only is the scene really cool, but the musical number, which of course we never heard because they changed the ending, the musical number that goes with the deleted ending is really, really cool too. And it's just like, oh man, to be able to, it would have been so cool to have seen that in the original theatrical ending, being a Godzilla fan as a kid as well and stuff. The original the original intended ending is so much freaking better than the theatrical ending. And you can understand why they changed it. They had a test screening and just everyone just was just dead, having so much fun throughout the movie, and then from what they say, dead silence after like Audrey dies for the rest of the movie, and people just, people's hearts and stuff were just destroyed. So you can understand why they did this happy ending and stuff like that. But the original intended ending is so much far superior, and as I said, the musical number that accompanies it is just so freaking cool too. And obviously the original ending is just the Audrey plants just freaking win. They just destroy. They just run amok and wreak havoc all over the country, and they're seen on the top of the Statue of Liberty, and just the Audrey plant. Oh, another thing, the Audrey plants basically win against America anyway, probably the world. Another change of the movie is unlike I think basically with the original movie we're meant to understand that Seymour spliced like a Venus flytrap and another plant together to make Audrey 2, and in this one it's kind of cool because there was this, total eclipse of the sun, and this thing just basically zaps out of the, out of space into, the Audrey 2 just zaps out of space into this table of this flower shop guy. So it's kind of, this movie's more like a, which I imagine is like the musical was, is more like a 1950s sci-fi movie in that regard, where it's kind of like an alien from outer space, and it's really makes sense and goes with especially the original ending as well, because the original ending's like a B movie kind of monster movie ending, so it's absolutely really cool. I'm going to be able to give this movie, particularly with the original ending now being restored on the Blu-ray, I'm going to give this Little Shop of Horrors 3.5 stars out of 4 stars. It's an absolute delight. If you're a fan of musicals, and you haven't seen this, you owe it to yourself to see this movie. And even if you're not a fan of musicals and still kind of like movies that are retro or whatever, this is still, me, as I said, not being a fan of musicals, I think the musical numbers in this movie are just stupendous and absolutely amazing. And actually I found myself just having, through so many of the musical numbers, just having goosebumps at how amazingly, not only are the songs and the lyrics to the songs, but then the way they're shot, and the three girls in their 60s dresses just adding so much to so many of the musical numbers. Oh my gosh, it's an absolute powerhouse and a highly recommended movie. And I understand to a lot of you naysayers who don't like musicals, I'm right there with you. I'm the same way. I don't like musicals myself, but I think the reason this one passes for me is, again, because I grew up with it, but also just because of the charm of the periodness of the movie being like in the early 60s or whatever. Is a lot of the reason why this musical gets a pass from me. So thank you very much for watching this review, and as always, we'll catch you on the next one.
I think it's supper time. You're drugged up.